That tastes great. Thank you.
Oh, glad. Can everyone make sure they sign in too? That's just more of a building thing than anything else.
Thank you.
You all right? Mm-hmm. You wasn't sure if you wanted to sit there or not.
I was just looking for balance.
Oh, okay. Well, I appreciate you all for coming. My name is Jesse Ross. Hopefully, I think I met everybody, just to make sure. And I'm going to get into Chris in a little bit. But the reason why we do these, and these are kind of random, specifically because there's never a good night or day. At this point, everybody's busy. But we at Connex, we're trying to figure out how to get people connected. When I met with a lot of young people who were in the alumni network, they just said, like, platform is great, but we just want to talk to other folks that look like us, that come from where we come from, and figure out how to navigate our careers. And so I was like, well, that's easy. Is it recording? Oh, okay. There you go. I was like, well, that's easy. I could just ask a couple of my friends, or all of them, and figure out how we can get together and just talk about the career journey. So this is meant to be very actual informal. Half of it, or even a quarter of it, I'll just kind of ask him some questions, have him tell his story, how we got there, and then it's really for you all. So that's pretty much it. Any questions before we start? Was the food good?
Yes.
Okay. Sammy's Avenue Eatery. Okay. Always coming. I'm trying to get Gerald. It's a date. We gotta figure out a date. Yeah. So I always try. When I got to the foundation, so I'll give you a short background on me. I'm from North Minneapolis. We actually went to school together. I'm a little homie though. He's a lot older than me. You're a lot. No, when I got to the foundation, I was trying to figure out like how I came from, like, I would say poverty, but came from like community. And when I got here, there wasn't that community connection. And so I was trying to figure out, okay, I went from working for a nonprofit, trying to figure out how to raise money, asking people for money, to now I'm giving out money. And this is different. And one of the ways that I figured out as far as understanding power and access was, now that I have some, how do I make sure that others are included? So Sammy's a good friend of mine. And I kept watching the different meetings. And it was Panera, D. Bryan's, Panera. I mean, we had Panera, like we had meetings on meetings, and it was always predominantly white caterers. And I was like, yo, so I just called up people I knew. Oh man, I'm blanking on the spot in the Wells Fargo building, the Latino spot.
The Wells Fargo building.
Yeah, they got super small. It's across the street. It's across from the store. It's Mexican. Yeah, I can't remember. Dang it. That's okay. It's gonna come to mind in the middle of while you talking. I just asked a couple of friends, like, hey, can you cater food? And Sammy was the first one that was like, oh yeah, absolutely. Which is why Adrian's here, Destiny. So I'm always trying to figure out how can we support our folks and build those bridges and also create access. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted Chris to be here, because he's the G, and a lot of stuff that I've learned from him. So if you could just tell them a little bit who you are, what you do. Don't give them the background story yet. Just introduce yourself.
So my name is Chris Pham, and I am an attorney at Fredrikson Byron, which is one of the larger law firms here in downtown Minneapolis. And I am also an entrepreneur. I am a co-owner and an investor in a nightclub here in downtown Minneapolis called The Exchange and Alibi Lounge.
Word. You're also a dad.
Yes, also a dad of 3 amazing children, well-behaved, intelligent, and, you know, as a parent, so far so good. They are the least of my concerns and worries every day, which makes it easy for me to do all the other things I have to do.
That's dope.
Being a dad.
That's dope. So what do you do, like, in your day life, work professional?
So in my professional life, so I am a business litigator. I primarily represent large companies that get sued. I've been doing business litigation now for about 9 years, and it's been quite the experience. No 2 days are alike in my world. You kind of set your day, like, for example, this morning I came in today knowing that I had a couple of video conferences in the afternoon. I had an event with a client this afternoon before coming here, and that was all the structure that I really had. But beyond that, once you show up and open your door, emails nonstop, phone calls nonstop, problems nonstop, potential clients coming in, calling you, so it's really it's intense. It's a lot going on. You have to really understand how to manage your time. You have to really balance all the things that are going on and be able to prioritize. If somebody reaches out and something that needs immediate attention, you might have to drop everything that you're doing, and then you put that to the back of the day, and the back of the day becomes tomorrow, and then tomorrow becomes next week, and you're always playing catch up. It's like you're always having to do something. So that's one of the things that I actually enjoy about the practice of law is that it's ever changing, it's nonstop, and it keeps me on my toes.
That's what's up. So give them a little bit of background, like where you're from, how you grew up, who was in your house, all of that.
Sure. So I was born in Hollywood, California. Both of my parents are immigrants from Vietnam. They came over to the U.S. at the end of the Vietnam War in the late 70s. So I was born in the early 80s during the middle of the war on drugs, and was born in South Central or Southern California. It wasn't an ideal place to raise kids. So my parents thought we'd be better off coming to Minnesota. So we moved here when I was really, really young, and I grew up in North Minneapolis. Pretty much single-family household. My mom, single parent, just my sister and I, just the two of us that I grew up. My mom had to work 3 different jobs just to be able to maintain and take care of my sister and I. And so, I can appreciate a lot of the struggles that Jesse had mentioned. We went to the same grade school, so we met early on. And, it's pretty crazy to see, folks that, I grew up with and who I've known for, the better part of 20 years doing the kinds of things that they're doing. And, not just that, but then to also be like-minded in the sense that, we're here because we want to give back to you all. We want to be, the folks that reach back as we climb, and be mentors and, help people, as Jesse mentioned, navigate, their life. It's not an easy road, I'm sure Jesse has. I certainly have had to overcome significant obstacles and adversities to get to where I am in life today. But rather than, expecting everybody to have to live with those same adversities and obstacles, if there's any knowledge or wisdom that I can impart, upon you all, that's what I want to do, so that you can learn from the mistakes that I've made and, hopefully get to where you want to be in life as well.
Dope. So you went to Ascension. I'm going to fast forward just because I know. He ended up going to De La Salle High School. And then where'd you go to school? College, sorry.
So after De La Salle High School, I went to St. John's University, which is a private Catholic school out near St. Cloud. I went there for my freshman year, had a full scholarship. Again, growing up in a single-parent household, I was a first-generation college student. So my mom didn't know anything about college, the admissions process, any of that stuff. It was really just, get good grades and you got to go to college. And so for me, I didn't know what that was really like. I took the ACT, probably the very last ACT that you could take before starting college. And I visited St. John's University in May of 2000, and I started there in August of 2000. So when you talk about like last minute, it was kind of St. John's was kind of a default option because I got a full ride.
Yep.
My mom's don't got to pay for tuition. That's where I'm gonna go. So I went there. Great learning experience. Met some very, very great friends that I still keep in touch with to this day. Most of them were foreign exchange students from the islands, from the Bahamas specifically. So I wouldn't change anything about that experience I had. But one of the things I learned is that, growing up in the inner city and in Minneapolis, living out there in the sticks, it wasn't for me. So I ended up transferring back to the University Minnesota, here in the Twin Cities campus, and that's where I finished out my college career.
What was your degree in?
My degree was in sociology, law, criminology, and deviance. That was my major, and I had a minor in African American studies.
Dope. So, Asian dude from the north side, or Vietnamese from the north side, African. I don't think I actually knew that.
Yeah, African American studies.
I actually enjoy doing these things because there's always something that I learn. So you always wanted to be a lawyer?
No, not at all. I happened to become a lawyer also by default.
Okay.
So, for me, growing up in a Vietnamese household, there's a common thread in which Asian parents want their kids to be doctors. I was no different, and neither was my mom. So she was like, you need to be a doctor. Like, you got to be a doctor. You'll make good money. You'll be able to have a better life than I was able to provide you. And so, again, growing up in a single-parent household, I just want to make my mom proud, right? Mm-hmm. So at St. John's, I did the pre-medicine program there. I took the biologies, the chemistries, did all these labs, pretty much lived in a lab is what it felt like. And so when I transferred back to the U of M, more of the same, biologies, chemistries, all these labs. And into my first semester, my sophomore year, I was in organic chemistry, and I was like, this is just not for me. Yeah. So for me, I had to figure out how am I going to break my mom's heart, and how am I going to tell her that I'm not going to be a doctor and that I'm dropping out of this pre-med program. And at that same time, I was taking a course. It was an introductory course to criminal justice, and it was something that just piqued my personal interest. Mm-hmm. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to tell my mom I'm going to be a lawyer, and hopefully that's, going to satisfy her, and she'll be proud of that. And so went home, told her, you know what? I'm not going to be a doctor. I can't do these sciences. It's not for me. And her first question was like, well, what are you going to do instead? I was like, well, I'm going to be a lawyer. She was like, okay, that's good. That makes sense. That's a prestigious career. I can see you doing that. So then at that point, I pretty much ended up taking all the courses in my major. And by my junior year, I had finished my degree program. And they're like, well, you got to take a couple other classes. What are you going to do? And that's how I ended up taking African American studies. Again, personal interest. I got to take some really dope classes that I personally enjoyed. And I had enough credits. So they're like, well, we can give you a minor in this, So that's how that came about. So I graduated from the University of Minnesota. And, as graduation was approaching, my mom's asked, so law school is next, right? And I said, no, not yet. At that point, I was 22 years old. I knew two things. One, I wasn't ready to work a 9 to 5. And two, I wasn't ready to go to law school. I didn't think I had the discipline. I still lived on campus. All my guys are there. We had a lot of fun, partying. I just wanted to play basketball all day long. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that law school wasn't the right time for me. So I decided to go to graduate school. And, I knew that if I lived here in Minnesota, it'd be more of the same. Mm-hmm. Hanging out, playing ball, and, the distractions that come with, having all that free time. And so I decided to pick up and move and go back to California. So I moved back to California, where I went to grad school for 2 years. And I knew that if I could balance going to school full-time and working full-time, because California is super expensive, the cost of living is very high, I knew I had to work full-time. And I thought, if I can manage those two things and still have fun and live, life, then I'd be ready for law school. And so while I was in grad school, I took a prep course to take the LSAT, which was the exam to get into law school. I wrote my master's thesis. I graduated. I worked full-time. I ran 2 different retail stores, and I still had time to have a lot of fun. So, I felt like at that point I was ready. And so then after graduating from graduate school and having a master's in criminal justice, moved back to Minnesota, where I went to law school at William Mitchell, which is now Mitchell Hamlin.
Dope. So, yeah, there's a lot right in there. So you worked at Foot Locker. You worked at a lot of spots, right? Yeah.
So my very first job was at the Cookie Cart, nonprofit bakery in North Minneapolis. Yeah, and so, shout out to the Cookie Cart. It was really through the Cookie Cart and that program that I was able to go to De La Salle High School. Yeah. And so at that time, the Cookie Cart had a program in which, in exchange for a full ride to go to De La Salle High School, I had to bake cookies after school, and I had to tutor the kids, and it was a great trade-off, and I got paid on top of that. Yep. The Cookie Cart was a great program. It really taught me a lot of time management skills, conflict management, because you're working with a bunch of your peers. Mm-hmm. And so that was a great place for me to work. And so that was my first job. And then while in high school, I started working at Foot Locker down here in downtown Minneapolis, 7th Street.
Literally,
literally, like right across the street was where I worked. So that was my first job, and I got that job because the manager there grew up in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that we're going to be talking a lot more today is about networking.
Yeah.
And so I met my Foot Locker manager, Jason, from playing basketball. We're just out, on the north side hooping, and we got to know each other. And when I became of age, I was like looking for a job, and he gave me the shot.
Yeah.
So it was through that relationship, and I learned at that point, at that age, that the people that and who are in your network, can really help you along the way in life.
Oh man. So like most people, I always try to tell people and remind them like the cookie card that they know now is not like they had us on the block.
Oh man, very,
like
very
selling
cookie
cookies.
Yeah,
like,
before the labor laws really kicked in. The cookie card was very different. So the facility that the cookie card is housed in now is right around the corner from where I started. So I started in a much smaller facility on Emerson, but I got to see it grow, over the years. I worked at the cookie card from about 95 to 2000 when I graduated from high school. Saw it evolve, and then over the years I stayed in touch. I always went back to the cookie cart, and sure enough, at one point in my career early on, it went full circle, and I got to sit on the board of the cookie cart, and I got to see them expand and open up into a St. Paul facility as well. So now the cookie cart serves both Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Yeah, that's what's up. So I'm going to ask maybe one or two more questions, and then we can jump in. So maybe talk a little bit about your outside of 9-to-5 life, and the networking piece and the club and all that stuff, and why you got into it, but also some of those things and those connections about networking. And I preface it with like what I love and appreciate about Chris is his. So most people who know me know I don't sleep a lot. I don't know how he does half of the stuff he does because I don't sleep that much, but we're constantly like, I'm over here, he's over here, we're doing this. Hey man, I know that like he's constantly introducing people and constantly creating spaces for it. Like, so maybe talk about why you felt like that was important, what made you kind of dive into some of those things, and then we can kind of just go for it.
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, when I decided to go to law school, it wasn't because I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I was going to law school to make my mama proud, right? And so I didn't know what that was going to look like. So I got to law school, was in my first year, and I had applied for this summer program in which I would be able to work at a large firm. They had 25 spots with over 100 applicants, and I applied. I got lucky, and I had a summer internship at a large firm here. It's actually in this building, and so I worked at that firm for 12 weeks over the summer, and that was my first dose of reality of what being a lawyer was like. I had no idea what to expect. I really thought I was going to go to law school to be an entrepreneur. I figured I'd get through law school. I would have, the tools to start my own business. When I was in California, I ran 2 retail stores. I grew up working at Foot Locker, at Demo in Brookdale, so I had all this retail experience. And so I figured, I could just start my own business. That's what I was going to do with my law degree. And after that summer program, 12 weeks, I realized, okay, I'm learning more about what it means to be a lawyer at a large firm. And it was a great experience. And, again, growing up in North Minneapolis, I didn't know what to expect. Right? I don't know any lawyers. I didn't have any in my family. And so when I got that first offer to work at this firm, I called the HR recruiter and was like, I think you guys made a mistake on my offer letter. And she was like, is everything okay? And I was like, I think I added 1 too many zeros because I'm still in law school. And she was like, no, that's right. That's what we pay, our summer associates because that's what you're going to get paid when you come out of law school. And I was like, wow, okay, so let me take this really serious, first of all, because this is an opportunity, right? And I'm not going to drop the ball.
Yeah.
So fast forward, I worked through that summer, and at the end of the summer, the law firm gave me a permanent offer, which was very unheard of for somebody who'd only been through law school for 1 year. So law school is 3 years long if you're full-time, and after 1 year, I received this offer, and they said, we're going to give you a job after you graduate. And I was shocked because I had not heard that was something that law firms did, and most didn't. And they said the only condition is that you come back for another summer with us and you don't go nowhere else. So I could tell that, they really wanted me there.
Yeah.
So I took that offer, finished out law school, and I had a full-time job waiting for me after graduation, which is huge, especially because I graduated right after the recession. Mm-hmm. So I graduated in 2009. The economy tanked in 2008. And a lot of my peers struggled to find jobs. A lot of them started bartending, working in retail and at restaurants just to have a job because there were no legal jobs, and I was lucky and fortunate that I had a contract that said, I had a job.
Yeah.
On top of that, while I was in law school, I had my two oldest kids. So by the time I sat for the bar exam, I had a 6-month-old and an 18-month-old, and I have no idea how I got through that. Probably not sleeping is what I would guess.
Definitely not sleeping.
But dealing with those challenges, by the time I started practicing law, I was like, man, the hardest is behind me. Or so I thought. It was like, I've gotten through this. I can make it really through anything. And so although I thought I was going to be an entrepreneur while I was in law school, I ended up starting to work in private practice as a lawyer. And, the more that I learned about what that meant, it is very entrepreneurial. And I learned that, if you work long enough at a law firm, you might be up for partnership. I didn't really know what that meant. You hear it all the time on TVs and shows, and people talk about making partner. And I finally learned that meant that you got to be an owner of the law firm, owner of the company. So you develop your own practice, and that's like being an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And so I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But still, a part of me, wanted something different. And so an opportunity came along to invest in the nightclub in downtown Minneapolis, and one of my lifelong friends had approached me with the opportunity. We talked about it. He's a financial advisor. I trusted him, and we decided to do it together. We thought it would make financial sense, and then, for me, it was, again, an opportunity for me to do some entrepreneurial, which I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit. I always wanted to do something like that, and so that is what really catapulted my career, outside of the 9 to 5, as Jesse mentioned. And so now, as a co-owner of a space in downtown Minneapolis, I started thinking about ways I could utilize that space to both build my network, to meet more people, and to bring more people that look like me and Jesse together. And that's what I did with the space.
That's dope. So I can keep going. Do y'all have questions?
Yeah, feel free to ask questions at any point about anything. I'm an open book, transparent. So.
I got one. How do you get past a feeling of complacency, at a time where you feel kind of stagnant in a way?
Yep.
So how do you motivate yourself to keep going?
It depends on where you're at in life. I am no stranger to complacency. I like to think of it as running on a treadmill, right? Like you're running, but you feel like you're not going nowhere. And there were different points where I felt like that. The biggest thing for me was once I had my children. So I'm in law school. Law school was hard. School came very easy for me. I was the type of kid that most kids hated because I show up, sit down for an exam, get an A. I'm not studying. School came very easy for me, all the way from high school to college. I could sit down and whip up a paper in 10 minutes and do well on it. Even grad school was a breeze for me. And when I was in grad school, again, I was full-time grad student, full-time work, and, wrote a master's thesis, prepared for the LSAT to get into law school. And that was all easy for me. And so, but once I got to law school, that was a different kind of beast. And there, that was the first time that I was really, required to work my butt off, to do well in school. And at that point, getting pregnant with my oldest son, I knew that failure was not an option. So while there are times and periods that I wanted to quit, or man, do I really want to go through this? There are other people, other peers in my first year of law school dropping out, quit, and said, "This isn't for me. I'm not doing this. This is like torture, right?" And for me, it was I got to suck it up. I got to get through it. I got to keep pushing. And so my kids were the main motivating factor for that. At that point in my career, I started practicing law, and again, there are periods, where I'm thinking man, am I really cut out for this? Yeah. One of the things that I learned while I was in my third year of law school, so I'm just about to graduate, I'm about to start my career, and I took a course called Work of the Lawyer, and this course required me and one of my classmates to do some kind of research about the legal profession. And so we decided to research diversity in the legal profession. And that was, something that I had not really looked into. I didn't know, again, much about it. I didn't have any lawyers to look up to or to talk to growing up. And what I learned is that the legal profession is the whitest profession. compared to all professions.
Wow.
And so I looked at, my classmate who was my partner, who's, my white male counterpart. I was like, yo, like, what am I getting myself into? Like, I think you'll be good based on the statistics we're seeing, but what am I going to do?
Be good. Yeah.
And so, I was kind of nervous about that. But at this point, I was like, look, I have a job. I'm going to start working, and I'm going to just see how it goes. And there were several points, early on in my career where I was like, I can see why this is a difficult, profession for minorities and diverse individuals to make it. I know one of the very first times I went to court to argue, I was down in Rochester in Olmsted County, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like nervous enough as it is, and I don't really know what to do, right, because it's my first time. And the court clerk, kept looking at me, and then, we're sitting there, and then, eventually he spoke up, and, him and the judge were like, so do you know when the lawyer's coming? And I was like, oh, wait, no, I am the lawyer. And they're looking at me like short hair, like not white, in Rochester. Right. Mind you, I have a suit on, but apparently that wasn't good enough to, for them to think that I was supposed to be there and that I was where I was supposed to be. And so, that was one of the first experiences where I felt like, man, like, is this what it's going to be like the rest of my career? People questioning and doubting and wondering, whether I'm supposed to have a seat at that particular table. Yeah. So in moments like that, again, it's a lot of things that motivate me. I'm human. I'm like everybody else. There are times where I just like, man, I'm gonna just go home for the day. Call up. I need to go get a drink. Like, it's one of those things. But in addition to my kids really pushing and motivating me, I think about how I can utilize the platform that I have and what my success would mean to others behind me. We talked about making partner and what significance that had. And for me, it was a career goal that I had because, again, statistically, there are very, very few diverse individuals who become partners at large law firms. Mm-hmm. Here in Minneapolis, that statistic is 4% as of 2018. Mm. So meaning out of all the partners at law firms in Minneapolis, only 4% are individuals of color. And for me, it was like, okay, I always wondered, who's going to be my role model? Do I have somebody who looks like me to look up to and say, you know what? He done made it. He done paved the way. Mm-hmm. So now I have the playbook. I know how to navigate this, but I didn't have that. So for me, I felt like if I could be that person and then I can impart that wisdom and, show others like yourselves that are coming up, this is the playbook. These are the unwritten rules. These are the landmines to avoid. This is how you play the political game. This is how you get there. Mm-hmm. That I can help be a change agent so that I'm not the only one that's going to be at that level where there are more coming up. And that's ultimately what I want to do. Yeah. While I enjoy practicing law, I want to see more people who look like me rise in the ranks, and that's something that I'm very passionate about, and that I'm very involved in, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives at my firm and in the legal community as a result of that.
So I know, you may not know that I know this, but so I know Chris gives a lot, like time, effort, office space. Like one of our guys, Josh, told me about, like you gave him an office space for him to study and all that stuff. Like, you just don't see that. And part of the reason why, I believe one of the reasons why we're friends is you find people throughout your professional career, and through life in general, but definitely through your professional career that you see, like, yo, I can rock with them. And so, like, I know Jocelyn from multiple different venues. Like, our birthdays are super close, so that might got something to do with it. But we also live, like, a block from each other, too. That might have something to do with it, too. But there's times when, like, you find people, you're like, yo, I can rock with them. And there's one of the reasons why I keep people around me who keep me pushing, like, to kind of combat that complacency, is I always see them moving. Mm-hmm. And not, like, busy work, but always see, like, there's times he'll be like, yo, I'm just leaving the office and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Or I'm going into the office at 2 o'clock in the morning. And then he'll be at the elevator network, like, that night, and then he got something with his kids the next morning, and it's like, go, 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 but not like, oh, I'm going to just run myself ragged. It's like, no, I have responsibilities. Mm-hmm. And when you see people around you who you respect or you admire or you just rock with that look like you, come from where you come from, like, I've been at his crib, and you're just like, yo, I remember like it didn't used to always be like this. We used to be like, yo, we eating? Are we eating together? We can go to McDonald's and share a couple Happy Meals or whatever that is. And then now to be like, no, I got it. Don't worry about it. And so like you find people who give, who serve, who also have the same drive. And not everybody around you is like that. Like you find out throughout college, high school, whatever those careers are, like there's people that rock with, and there's people, and one particular person I'm thinking of that I just saw, or we may have just saw on the news. Did you see that the other day? Yeah. It don't work. Mm-hmm. Like you can work a job and not work. Mm-hmm. Go for it.
Yeah, and just to to build on top of that, who you surround yourself with. I mean, it makes a significant difference. Again, growing up in North Minneapolis, obviously I got in my fair share of problems and troubles, but there are certain turning points where decisions have to be made, and you know what? You might not think about it then, but the decision that you ultimately make can really have a significant impact on your future. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That first step for me was when I decided to work at the cookie cart. Wow. So the principal at my grade school, the school where Jesse and I went to, she approached me and said, hey, I know your mom is barely making it, single-parent household. I know they're divorced. I know all that stuff. I know you probably can't afford to go to this high school, but if you're interested and if you're willing to go, I can try to make some things work out for you. Absolutely. And so it was through, that moment in time, I'm in the 8th grade, and I have to decide where I'm going to go to high school. And it was, okay, I have that opportunity to go to De La Salle. I didn't know much about it. I knew it was a private school. It was a good school from what I was told. So I decided to do it. That was one turning point, and that was by deciding to work at the cookie cart. I felt like that saved me in a lot of respects, kept me out of trouble, it kept me busy. And then, once I got into high school, I remember the summer before I started 9th grade, I got into some trouble, got arrested and stuff like that. And once I got to De La Salle, I don't know how they knew, but, my freshman basketball coach said, that stuff you did this summer, we don't tolerate that here. We don't condone that. Like, you need to get your stuff together. And at that point, it was like, I have an opportunity here. I'm at a good school. Obviously, he knew about the situation. I felt like they were investing in my success by talking to me and by showing me, you can make it. Like, you're not here just to blow by 4 years. Like, you're here to learn and you're here to make something of your life. And so, at that point, I really learned the importance of, the people you surround yourself with. And then the other point I wanted to make about what Jesse said is monetizing your time. We're talking about how busy we all are. They say time is money. Mm-hmm. There's only 24 hours in a day, and what you do with that time, you have to make the most of it. You have to be efficient, and you have to maximize that time. And so, for me, it was trying to figure out, all right, how am I going to develop a practice, build a book of business as a lawyer, still keep in touch with my peers and my community, find time for my kids, and balance all of these millions of things that I have going on. And so, while I decided to invest in the nightclub, I didn't know what opportunities that would bring. Fast forward to a point it'll be 3 years ago this January, I decided to start a weekly networking happy hour called Elevate Your Network. And the whole reason why I decided to start this happy hour was to bring together professionals of color together. I had sat on a panel about 3.5 years ago in which St. Paul Business School, they did, the University of St. Thomas, they did a study on professionals of color in the Twin Cities. They surveyed about 1,200 of them to find out why Minneapolis struggles with retention. And what that means is that while we do a good job of recruiting people from all over the country who are minority professionals to come work here and live here, they don't stay. 2, 3, 4, 5 years, maybe the winters have something to do with it, they leave. And so, based on that study, 2 of the statistics that really stood out to me, one was that over 50% were dissatisfied with the quality and quantity of culturally relevant events. In other words, there ain't nothing for our people to do. Other than your random Mike Epps comedy show or some concert here and there. There wasn't something consistent to, for us to do. The other statistic was that over 50% said that outside of my immediate employer, I don't meet any other professionals of color. So I don't know, who there is out there. I just know the people that are in my immediate building. So when I launched Elevate Your Network, it was to provide a space where professionals of color from all over the Twin Cities can come, meet each other, listen to the music we want to listen to, enjoy each other's company in a space that we felt safe. And so it was through launching that initiative and doing that happy hour that I really expanded my network. And so, when we talk about the power of networking, people look at it as like this thing, right? Like, oh, it's networking. I go to this function, when it's really no different than anything else that people do in life. I gave a speech to college students about networking, and one of the first things I tell them is like, you've been doing this your whole life, right? If you're in college, you've been doing this your whole life, because before your significant other became your significant other, y'all were complete strangers. Before you met your best friend, y'all were complete strangers. How did you become boyfriend and girlfriend, or whatever have you, or how did you become best friends? Got to know each other, you build a relationship, and that's all that networking is. You just meet people, you follow up, you stay in touch. I mean, I've known Jesse now, like I said, over 20 years. Yeah. So he was a part of my network when I was in fourth grade. Did we know that when we were in fourth grade? No, but we kept in touch over the years. Yeah. The advent of social media has really enabled people to stay in touch better. Yeah. And so networking is not something that, you have to be afraid of. My approach to networking was just, how can I help people? Yep. I show up, I meet people. I actually like it when the networking events are a little bit slower, because then I can go speak to each and every individual and ask, what do you do? What brings you out? Where are you from? And then after talking to them, at that networking event, I might meet somebody who's like, I just moved in town from D.C. I heard from such and such that there's an event to check out. And I was like, cool, because I got some people who are also from D.C. Exactly. who moved here a few years ago. Let me, introduce you to them. And now they keep in touch. And now we play ball together. And now, people go to each other's church. They're going to the same barbershops. And that's all networking is. When I just, what's the phrase? The plug. Yeah. Right? People know who's the plug. And that's all that I do with networking is, if somebody's like, look, I'm looking for a realtor, I'm looking to buy my house, I'm looking to sell my house, whatever it is, people reach out to me. They know that I'm a lawyer, but, what I do extends far beyond just being, a legal professional. Yeah. It's about having a robust network, one that I vetted, one that, I know if I'm sending somebody to you, it's because I trust you, because I've been burned by that. And, that's something that you have to, be cognizant of is, who you're sending people to. Yeah. So that's one of the things that I did with networking. That's how I utilize the space, and it's really helped me grow my legal practice as well. Yeah, so
that's dope. Questions?
I got one. So you said when you were in a sophomore year that you realized that medical or being a doctor wasn't for you, and that you had to make that decision and tell your mom, break your mom's heart to do that. So coming to that decision seemed to be easy, but it seemed like the hard part was doing the action. How do you go about going through with that action?
For me, it was really time. Time was of the essence, right? And so having now into my sophomore year, took all the science classes, I had to figure out, I want to graduate within 4-year time period. I can't continue to putz around with going through these sciences and these chemistries and then decide, 4 years in, like, okay, now I'm going to change my career. And so for me, it was, important to make a decision, and that was really fueled by the timing of it, right? So I was in the College of Liberal Arts, and so I needed to take a bunch of different random classes like Spanish and math and the sciences anyways. And so, and sitting down and figuring out, like, it came down to, like, what's best for me. This is obviously the rest of my life. My mom's not going to be the doctor for me. She's not going to be, throwing on the gown like, I got to do this. And so for me, it was, what can I do that's not going to set me back time-wise? What am I going to do that I know I will succeed in? And so at that point, I knew that I didn't want to take any math. When I was in high school, I took advanced placement calculus, and I took all the honors and AP math classes. And they were hard, but I got through them, and I got college credit. So I was like, as long as I don't take no math, I'm good. And this was, the major I declared, was a major where I only had to take statistics, which is kind of like math. And, so it was really self-awareness, right? Knowing what I would succeed in, what would help me, and what would get me to where I want to go. And then, the rest of that is just, executing the plan.
I even heard, though, talking to people and understanding what's the circumstance, because I think sometimes, especially in college, you can just say I just want to switch over here, but having an advisor and going to make sure yo, how many credits do I actually need? Right. Like, do I have to take that class? Because I was like, I didn't want to take any. Once I did AP Calculus, I was like, I'm done. I'm not taking another math class again. Like, straight up, I picked organizational development because I didn't have to take a math class. I was very set on that.
Yeah, you gotta. That's the thing. One of the first places where I learned about my self-awareness when it comes to decision making and picking my courses. As soon as I dropped out of the pre-med program and decided I was going to do sociology, law, crime, and deviance, I still had to take a bunch of random courses because, again, it's the College of Liberal Arts. And I remember spring semester, my sophomore year, I was enrolled in a course called Humanities. I took it because it fit around my basketball schedule. Because I like to hoop in the morning, I like to hoop for noon ball, and I like to hoop at 6 p.m. So I was like, I need classes within those time frames. So clearly, you know where my priorities were when I was in college. And so I picked this humanities class because it was not going to interfere with like my time to play basketball. Didn't know anything about this class. I showed up the first day, broke out this book. I started looking at it, and I thought I was going to fall asleep like with my eyes open. I was bored out of my mind. Fast forward, midterms came, I didn't show up. Fast forward, finals came, I didn't show up. And by the end of that semester, I had all A's and B's, and then I had this incomplete for humanities. And the professor was emailing me, reaching out. I was like, sir, I see your transcripts. You're obviously a bright kid. Why don't you, I was like, why don't you, read these books, and then I'll let you take the exam, and, we'll give you a grade, You won't be able to get a full credit, but I'll let you make up these exams because I don't want to, be a detriment to your success here because obviously you're a bright student. And I told him, nah, I'm good. I was like, I'm not going to read these books, and he was like, so I'm going to have to give you an F. I was like, all right, I'll have to live with that. So I got an F. First time in my entire life ever, I've got an F on it. Like every other grade I've ever gotten up to that point were all A's and B's. So I got this F, and, I had to figure out, so how am I going to deal with this? Man, so like Jesse, I had to go back. I had to go talk to the advisor. Like, how's this gonna set me back? What do I do? I ended up having to take an art and painting class that summer and some other random courses, and so I made up for the time. I ended up getting finishing school within 4 years, but that F continued to haunt me. Right, so that decision there, I had to talk about when I was applying for grad school why I had all A's and B's in this random F, and so I had to talk about that when I applied for law school.
Wow.
But it became one of those, again, we talk about defining moments in life where, I made a poor decision, but I've had to live with that decision, and I've had to show, that from that point, I could persevere and, do better. And after that F, I think the last 2 years of college, I didn't get anything less than an A. So.
There it is.
But the point is, even if at one point you fail, like I literally failed the class, you can still make it.
Yeah.
So.
For all my college students out here listening to this,
but avoid that if you can. Save yourself heartache later.
Don't hear it's okay to get an F. That's not what he's saying.
That's not the message.
That's not what he's saying.
Definitely not.
I love it. What else? I got tons of questions, but
any questions for anybody?
Alex.
So I'm assuming that you've had multiple different opportunities to choose one or the other. Like, how did you have to come over to choose that particular decision that you made in comparison to giving up some others?
Which decision are we talking about?
Just in general, throughout your career, what were some of the biggest decisions that you've had to make, and knowing that you'd have to give up some opportunities over others?
Yeah. That's one of those things where you learn by trial and error. When I first started practicing law, I was focused on I need to get clients. I need to, learn to develop a book of business, right? And so everybody that called, emailed, reached out, I met, I ran into, happy hour, whatever, I would, meet with every single person that reached out. And what I learned is that, I can't help every single person that reaches out, and it's not a good fit for every single person that reaches out. And so one of the things that I had to, really learn with my decision making is to kind of, establish a process in which I can vet situations first, right? Somebody hits me up on Facebook Messenger, I'm looking for a lawyer, everybody said to call you, contact you, whatever. And so rather than say, okay, come over, let's meet for coffee, I would say, what is a legal issue, what is the situation, and then learning like, okay, based on what they said, I can't help them, but I know just the person who can. Boom, here's my guy's contact information. Reach out to him, hit up my guy, tell my guy somebody's going to contact you about this employment issue, something that I don't, handle in my wheelhouse as a legal practitioner, but he does. And so then that is both helping them, right, getting them connected with the right person, saving me time in the process, and looking out for my guy. Yeah. And that's the way, the industry works. One of the things that I learned about the practice of law, which I had not known, was how it really operates. So again, not having any experience with it, one of the things I learned from my mentor, my sponsor, who is an older white male who's been practicing law for probably almost 40 years, extremely successful. I asked him, like, how did you get to be where you are today? Acknowledging that I'm never going to be a white male with the same access to, opportunities that he has, but still just generally like, what did you have to do? And he said, 98% of what I generate and bring into the firm comes from referrals. Mm-hmm. That means it comes from his network of peers. It means like his boys club is kind of what the phrase is called. And that's not a myth, that's a real thing where it's no different than like me and Jesse and a group of our peers getting together. It just has a certain stigma with that group. But, for me, it was like, I want to develop that same kind of network. I don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like, if you hit me up now, I have a robust network of lawyers nationally, all over the country. I have people hit me up, I'm looking for a lawyer in Florida. Send out a quick text, my guy in Florida, he got you. So it's really, monetizing my time. I said that before, and that's what helps me make my decisions. When opportunities present themselves, like, becoming a lawyer, what law school teaches you to do is think critically, right? So it teaches you to assess a situation. Look at all the facts, look at all the pros, the cons, the time involved, risking, the benefits and things like that. And so that's what has really helped me make the decisions that I needed to. And then, obviously because I'm not perfect, I rely on my peers. If I have a question and I want to bounce ideas off of somebody, if I need a sounding board, I'd hit up Jesse. I'm thinking about doing this, or they ask me to speak on this topic, like, what do you think? Am I qualified? Should I do it? Should I not? Different things like that.
That's what's up. I had a random question for you. I'm a guy, I got you. How many people do you think are in your phone book right now?
Man. Well, I have nearly 5,000 friends on Facebook, and for some reason, like, those are all imported into my contacts unintentionally.
Yeah.
And it's, I couldn't even tell you because, what I tell people is like my network started like the moment I learned to speak. Yeah. And so people I've known as far back as second grade, I can pick up the phone and call and say, yo, come through, check out this event, come to this happy hour, come do this, all the way up to like current day. And so, all the places I've lived, as big as California is, I lived there for 2 years, and even that became a small community for me. I met a barber. We became good friends. We started playing ball together, and next thing you know, like, oh, I saw your picture on somebody's refrigerator, and like my guy was over there like fixing their plumbing, and he saw your face, and I'm like, it just boggled my mind that like even a place as big as California, a place that I didn't grow up, can become a small community, if you're out networking and meeting people.
Yeah, that's what's up.
You had a question?
Go for it.
So as you were navigating through the system of being in an area where there's mostly all Caucasian people, what was the first question that you felt was like the right question to ask them to be kind of accepted, if that makes sense?
Yep. Great question. The way that I'm going to phrase my answer is not so much like what I asked them, but at what point did I know I was accepted?
Okay.
So that's the way I'm going to approach your question. Now, when I first started practicing law, first year associate, fresh out of law school, I showed up at my firm, and the first thing I did when I started working was I closed my door. And the way that I like to work is listening to Lil Wayne and Kanye and Jay-Z, and like that music gets me in a groove, right? Like that's I like to listen to music, when I'm working, because it helps really set the vibe for me. And again, I knew, given my surroundings, nobody else wanted to hear that, probably, right? I'm making assumptions as well, but I assumed they didn't want to hear hip hop booming out of my office, so I closed my door. Each time my phone rang, I'd have to look at the caller ID, and then if it was a personal call, I'd have to close my door before I answered the phone. And if it was a professional call, I'd leave my door open, and it was kind of like I felt like I was living two lives, if you will. My ex-wife, when I first started practicing, I was married at the time, she would call and she would say, am I talking to Chris or corporate Chris? Because she says I sounded different, depending on which Chris was on the phone. And so for me, it was kind of like a struggle with being my authentic self and whether I could be my authentic self, in a profession that was dominated by non-minorities. And so the point in which I started to feel more accepted was when I started to get good results, right? And so, a couple of years into practice, I don't know anything. I'm just learning. But, once you start winning oral arguments, once you start, doing good work, once you start getting praise from your peers, the partners you work with, once you get, praise from your clients, once you start winning awards and getting accolades, that really helps develop your confidence. And the more confident I became, the more comfortable I became in my skin at the law firm. And so it was a process. It didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen even in the first year. It was like, within the first 2 or 3 years of, being a lawyer, it wasn't probably until like year 4 or 5 where I felt like, it's casual Friday. I want to wear Tim's to work, with my jeans, or I want to wear this or that. And, I became more comfortable such that, people talking to me did not think, is this corporate Chris or Chris? And I found a way to kind of merge those two realities. And it took a lot of hard work, perseverance, and, getting results that got me to that point.
Yeah. I was going to echo that too. I think, so I spent 15, 16 years in nonprofit, pretty much being the only black guy, the youngest, the only person of color in a 3-state region for a while. Most of the time, I never worried about them accepting me. Part of that is a personality thing. I could really just care less what people think. But you want to be liked. Like, I believe that most people want to do good.
I don't know about that. I want to be respected.
Well, right. You can infuse different words. But in general, I think most people want to do well and be respected, whether it's liked, whatever. That came from producing. Like you can't fight facts. Like always says, men, women lie, numbers don't. Like I believe that, and there's proof to that. And so some of it is there's some stuff that does kind of take a little bit longer, and really the proof is in the pudding. Can you produce whatever it is that you do? So I tell people like, yo, if you're a babysitter, be the best babysitter and caretaker that you're supposed to do. People will call you back. I have friends who are like, yo, babysitter's trash. I'll never call them again. And then I have people who are like, yo, I'm always calling them because that's what they do. And I think that for the most part, I would say in those spaces, that doesn't fix it and it doesn't change it. But I do think when you produce, that helps those arguments and that helps continue to get people to be like, oh, well, maybe there is something about him or her, whatever that may be. That's a good question. All right, a couple more. Anybody got anything?
I got a quick question.
Go for it.
You talk a lot about like network marketing in a way. I read a book. It's called Contagious by Jonah Berger. It talks about like why things catch on, and it talked about one principle. It's called social currency, and it talked about the exchange of ideas between like one individual to the next. So it talked about like the power of word of mouth, and like within Minneapolis, like I kind of find it strange how people don't want to like share ideas towards one another. Like they feel like a fearful type of a way. Personal opinion, like for both of you, like why do you think it's like that, like within Minneapolis? So how come you think it's like people don't want to open up and share their ideas? They don't want to talk about their accomplishments, or they have a good job. They don't want to like talk about that to the next person.
Good question.
Yeah, I think your experiences are the building blocks of your character, right? So a lot of times it depends on what you go through. If I'm somebody who shared something with somebody and I got burned by it, right? Or they stole my idea, or they took it and ran with it, or we are supposed to be partners and they shut me out, that negative experience is going to kind of create some kind of caution within myself with the next situation. That's one thing. Another thing is, I think, as diverse individuals, we don't always get a fair shake, right? And a lot of times we can get burned in that regard that, leaves a certain bitter taste in our mouth about certain circumstances, that will kind of discourage you, But one thing that I would encourage is, so what you're referring to, I call it the crabs in the barrel mentality,
definitely.
Crabs in the bucket, like always pulling each other down. And that's why, I believe in reaching back as I climb. Is because there's room for everybody to succeed, and a lot of that comes with networking, and while people want to be in their own lane, that doesn't mean that people can't coexist. I am a very small group of lawyers of color, but all the lawyers of color, I want us to all win.
Yeah.
I don't want to only be the one that is winning, because that means I don't feel like I've done my job.
Yeah.
What I want to do is I want to see us all succeed, climb the ladder, so that we can all reach back as we climb. An opportunity for somebody else is not necessarily a loss for me. I believe that if you plant enough seeds, even if they don't all grow, you might have one that grows into the most, beautiful thing. And that's what networking for me is about. I feel like I go out into the community, I plant so many seeds that, I don't even need all of it to in order to succeed and to prosper, but you do enough good, you create enough goodwill, like good things happen to you.
Yeah.
So anytime somebody comes to me, with a question or for advice, I'm sincere, I'm genuine, I want them to truly succeed no matter what it is.
Yeah.
And I think that, my success, hopefully will encourage and inspire others to succeed in similar fashion, rather than to create competition. But a lot of that also comes, from personality. When I was in law school, my first year of law school, again, I didn't know what to expect. It is extremely competitive. And when I say that because your first year of law school, all the courses you take, they are on a mandatory curve. So with that mandatory curve, that means that if you're in a class with 10 people, most of the people are going to get C's. Some will get, maybe one person will get an A, somebody will get an F. Like, everybody cannot all get A's and B's. Given that, mandatory curve, it breeds so much competition that, nobody wants to help each other. If I miss a class and I ask one of my, classmates, can I get those notes? They'll look at me like I'm crazy, like I'm speaking another language. But for me, I was super collaborative. And so, if somebody missed a class, I offered my notes. Like, I didn't see you in class. You're right here. Like, this is what we talked about, because I figured, regardless of what my notes say or what you miss, like, if you're going to succeed, you're going to find a way to succeed. You know what I mean? And so I was more collaborative, and that has always been my personality trait, is to be collaborative. And that's why, I've been doing this happy hour thing now for going on 3 years, and I've started to see that other, individuals and organizations are starting to do very similar things. Like, in some instances, verbatim, like what their description is, I thought they copied and pasted mine, and, at one point there are times where I'm like, dang, it's great, because obviously the more networking for professionals of color, the better. Like, again, I want us to all win. But rather than feel some kind of way, I reached out to them directly. It was like, it sounds like, we kind of have similar goals in mind. We got, similar approaches. Let's collaborate and do something together. And they're probably like, we started this after you. I wonder if he knows, whatever the case may be. But, they were sitting there like, you really want to collaborate? I was like, yeah, absolutely. We can do something together. We can all win. We can all grow together. And that's my approach.
Yeah, I would just echo. I think I've been talking about this a little bit, or thinking about it. I think the high school we went to at D was so big on like tradition, and so the short version of it is, I think it's a culture thing. So culture in the Midwest, culture in different communities, culture in how you do things, and I think those issues happen everywhere. I think we only think about them here in the Twin Cities because we're here. I'm back and forth to Atlanta consistently. I travel a lot. International. Those things happen. Now, we may not hear about them, but they happen everywhere. I think that's a home-based culture thing. But I also think the culture or code that you create for yourself will breed that. So I'm a firm believer of, like, just always give more than I ask. Mm-hmm. So I always tell people, like, the 4-to-1 rule. You give, and give again before I ask you for anything. And that could be you give a compliment, you give a connection, you serve, do whatever. And I just believe the more that I give, the more will come back to me, even if it doesn't always come as a planted, a grown, seed. But I get the culture that I like to create for myself, and I want people to always know I gave everything I could. Right. And I'm a very competitive person, and so like I can thrive off of that, but I would rather thrive of us, we all win. And I think some of that was created like how I was raised. Some of that was created by the culture of the schools that I went to and the kind of culture that we kind of put together as, growing up and friends. But I also translate that to everybody that I come into. And not everybody has that same energy. You will know very quickly as you kind of put your stand. And this kind of goes back to what you're You don't know the fruit by, a man and a woman by their work and the fruit that they bear. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's always like, most of my friends are, I won't say most of them, I have a lot of friends who are transplants because I know what it's like to be in Minnesota and not know the snow, not know the seasons. People are like, yo, people don't come out in the winter. I'm like, this is true. But there are places, and when they go, here's where they go. Here are the different people, and so the same culture, I think we have to create that, and this is one of those spaces. The other thing I'll say too is I refuse to allow people to kind of take my energy, and I had to learn that over time. I've been burned by people. I could have walked around and said no, I'm good on this. I choose to again let people know, like, here's the standard. Like, if you come to my crib, you got anything, I got you. But, like, don't cross me. Don't cross my people. Not because I'm going to come after you and do something. That's just not the way I want to be known. That's not the way we should do things. And we can all eat. I promise you, we know stats, all of us. There's enough money. There's enough opportunities. There's enough positions. There's enough vehicles. There's enough of everything for everybody to eat. What's my man Paid in the Fool? He's like, yo, everybody eats, B. Mm-hmm. Like, I live off that, like, saying, like, we all, when you win, when you introduce somebody, he was in, where were you, in Chicago or something like that? And I'm like, yo, I just want the new profile picture that you get. Like, you got to be able to celebrate, and I think that is also contagious, like that book. Like, that energy is contagious, and I just believe that good will always outweigh that bad.
Yeah, and, something that I want to just tie into to what Jesse's saying that I think is extremely important and valuable is protecting your reputation. One way to protect your reputation is to simply just do good work, mm-hmm. right? I'm very active in the community. I'm well known in the community, and I'm confident that if you go and talk and ask anybody anything, they won't have anything to say about me. Yeah. And I know that, and I'm confident about that, is because I haven't burnt any bridges. I haven't done anybody bogus, and I've tried to help people, throughout life. Yeah. And when you put up, going back to that good energy, like, that becomes contagious. Yeah. And so when people come around me or I meet people, I have friends that ask me all the time, like, why do people always vent to you? Like, you'll meet them at a happy hour and they're talking about their personal life story with you and, all this stuff. I was like, I give off a good energy that people feel like they can trust me.
Easy to talk to, yeah.
And I think that has really helped me even in, my personal life as well as my professional life, because, as I meet people, especially as a lawyer, lawyers have a negative stigma a lot of times. Mm-hmm. People, talk, they're liars, you can't trust them, they're this, they're that, all these negative things. Right, so I already have that going against me when I meet people and they're like, oh, you're a lawyer, okay, they're already thinking bad things. And then, the fact that I'm a person of color, they're already thinking like, man, is he even a good lawyer? Should he be even practicing law? And so, but regardless of all of those, you put out good energy, you just be a good person at the end of the day. That's all you need to protect your reputation. So that, when anybody hits up Jesse looking for something, he's confident he can send them my way and then I'm going to take care of them, because that's the reputation that I've developed and you just got to protect that.
Yeah, he sent somebody, I mean, we send people all the time to each other. There was a guy, because I do speaking, and he was like, yo, Chris, he, like, introduced us, and then I told the dude, like, hit me up, and then it took him a while. And so then I was like, yeah, I was waiting on you last week. Just because I know the way that we work is like, I'm going to hit you right now, and not in a, like, expectation, but I'm going to open the door for you, but you got to walk through it. Mm-hmm. And so when we got on the phone, he was asking me for some stuff, and I just flat out told him, I was like, yo, the simple fact that Chris introduced you, I'm willing to work with you, but I also don't know you, and my name is online for this, and that. There was some stuff he didn't follow through, and it was no, like, bad thing, but it was more of like, yo, you also got to build that credit.
Yep,
And so I was like, so you got in on the introduction, that's great, but that ain't going to keep you there.
Mm-hmm.
And so continue to do the good work, and we'll see what happens. And I think that continues to just show. That's just one of those like tests over time. It works. So one of the last things I like to ask people, what is, if you could leave like a nugget or some advice for, because there's going to be people listening to this too, like what's 1, 2, however many pieces of advice that you would leave some young professional trying to figure out how to navigate their career?
I would encourage young professionals to be open-minded. We had talked a little bit about networking and how, it can be intimidating, it can be scary, but, it's necessary. And so I encourage you to just show up, right? I applaud you guys for being here today.
Yep.
You guys didn't have to be here. There's probably a million other things you could be doing. You have homework, work, family, other obligations, but showing up, goes a long way. The first, job opportunity I had is because I showed up at different events, and so when I came in for my interview, they already knew my face, and that spoke volumes for them. So showing up is important. One of the things that we had just touched on is protect your reputation. A lot of times people in college, they're not thinking, if I burn my roommate, who cares? It's just my roommate. Mm-hmm. But where's your roommate going to be in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? As a lawyer and having gone through law school, I keep in touch with all my, a lot of my classmates from law school because, one day they can be at a company that I'm marketing to get legal business from. Yeah. And if I would have burned them back in law school and I showed up asking for legal work, they're going to be like, I remember in law school, you were an asshole. Mm. People remember that stuff. They absolutely do. So I say that to say protect your reputation. And the last thing is, to do what we're doing here. As you guys elevate and progress in your careers, man, make some time to give back. The things that you learn, that's one obstacle that the person behind you doesn't have to go through, right?
Absolutely. So. Dope. Appreciate you, man. Thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank you all for showing up. There's no amazing way to end this joint, so I'm gonna just say we done.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say have business cards, so you guys can take one, pass them around. I really do encourage follow people to keep in touch.
Yeah.
That's one of the things about networking that people probably fail at 95% of the time is a follow-up. People exchange business cards, link up on social media, and then that's where it ends.
98%,
until you see them again.
98% of people don't follow up. That's a statistic.
Yeah. So, I give up my contact info, as questions come up, if I can be an asset or a resource, you have a question literally about anything. Email is the best way because I get, a million of a day. Yeah. And, but, I want people to do well. So.
And he's super active on social media and LinkedIn, every platform. Yeah. I was going to say, you're more active than I am. I'm like, yo, that's dope. So, yeah, appreciate you, man. Thank you. Thanks you all for coming. If you parked in the building, make sure you get a parking voucher if I didn't get you already. If not, next time you come, park in the building, and I'll take care of your parking.